So we're starting to check in, and I know that he's looking at us like it's too early, to check in. And I said, well, we just want to leave our bags and come back at check-in time. And he says, well, I'm sorry, we're fully booked. And we said, no, we have a reservation. He says, no, we're full. We're not we're not expecting anybody. And, we're completely booked. And my sister and I are looking at each other, jet lagged, exhausted, going, oh no, this can't be happening to us. So we're going back and forth. She's desperately looking for the confirmation emails and stuff. We pull it out, including the one from my, Italian friend at work. And he reads it. He says, "Oh, I see. Due sorelle. That's two sisters." He says, "I heard two sisters were coming. I thought you were nuns."
Welcome to the Where Have You Been podcast. I'm your host, Bill Ream, and each week on the pod, I have conversations with incredible guests from all walks of life. Expect to hear funny, crazy, emotional, life-changing, and even sometimes life-threatening stories and experiences that will entertain and inspire you. As always, I appreciate your likes, subscriptions, ratings, and reviews wherever you are listening. It doesn't sound like much, but it truly helps the pod get to the ears of more people who may enjoy it. And check out the website, whybpodcast.com, for links to the socials where you can find pictures from the guests and their stories, and also buy merch if you're so inclined. Now let's get to this week's episode. Thank you for being here. And welcome into another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. Of course, I am your host, Bill Ream, and we have, as I say every week, we have another incredible guest. This time we have someone who has a claim to fame that we have never had the likes of on the podcast before. We have the queen of internet safety, queen of online safety.
Queen of Jocelyn King, the queen of online safety.
There we go. We have the queen of online safety, Jocelyn. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself to everyone if you don't mind. Jocelyn King, who are you?
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bill. So great to be here with you and your audience. I love your podcast. Thank you for having such an informative and entertaining and just sheer, delightful listen. I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I am Jocelyn King, the queen of online safety. And what that means is I am the CEO and founder of Smarter Online Safety, we're an education-based company to help everyday people and small businesses and large enterprises protect themselves online. And we're very consumer focused. And I got here by being a cybercrime victim. I was actually targeted by cyber criminals and about 10 years ago. And it completely destroyed my life. I mean, it went on for over 2 years. I even had surveillance planted in my bedroom. And I ended up losing over $500,000 of savings for my retirement and all of that. I lost my 22-year marriage from the sheer stress and the effects it had on my husband. I lost a promotion opportunity at work, and I was at the height of a wonderful career in Silicon Valley. I almost lost my job because I was so distracted. I lost my health, and I nearly lost my mind. But I did recover. While I was looking for how to protect myself and recover from this, I kept looking for the checklist of how to prevent this and recover from it, and it didn't exist. So I made that my life mission at that point and got to meet some of the smartest cybercrime fighters on the planet. And working side by side with them, I learned the business of cybercrime, and I learned the hacker's playbook, and I learned how your data and mine and everybody's listening is sold on the dark web, very much like flea market items on eBay. So I learned all of that, and I learned what everyday people need to do to protect themselves. And I was fortunate then to go from being this devastated cybercrime victim to being named a top 10 woman in cybersecurity and using that as an opportunity to help as many people as I can protect themselves from the bad guys.
That is so awesome. And I would say even with all of that, I still think you're underselling yourself because not only, you do such a fantastic job. The website is amazing. You have like workshops, you have your own YouTube channel, right? Your own podcast. I mean, you're busy. And
yes. Well, and I have a weekly podcast so I can give people tips on how to stay safe online and keep them aware of what's going on. Because, cybercrime, it's kind of like, it's one of those things that makes everybody nervous, and you don't really want to spend too much. You don't want to park there too long. And it's very agitating. And then actually putting cyber protections in place is very much like taxes and doing a will or a trust. Everybody knows they need to do it, but they don't want to get started. And in this case, you really can put it off until it's way too late and
Oh yeah.
you get hurt. So I like to I do that for that reason. But thank you for the plug. I do stay busy, and I'm very fortunate that I get to do work I love with great people.
So awesome. Can you mentioned the name of your business. Would you mention the specific name of the website and the channel and then your podcast and whatever socials you have, things like that? I just like to get it out early so people
Yeah.
definitely get them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, the company is Smarter Online Safety. SOS is our logo. And the website is smarteronlinesafety.com. And the podcast is available on 12 different podcast platforms. So hopefully, wherever people are listening, you could find it. And then my YouTube channel as well has the video versions. So you can see the guests and see us in conversation. And we also have a newsletter that summarizes the tips and shares top things. The other thing too is if you go and you sign up, you're going to get access to a free online safety quiz that you can take. Because one of the things I found for myself and everybody I've helped is a lot of people, everybody's doing a lot of the right things. The problem is bad guys only have to be right once, and so you could have a whole area where you're leaving yourself completely exposed. I liken it to your house. Oh, and everybody knows how to lock their doors and windows and secure everything. But they say your home is your castle, and we all have this digital castle online that we're not even aware of. And most people are leaving, the gates, the gates open and the drawbridge down, and they don't even realize it. So I teach them how to see their online world so that they can close the gates and secure the windows and raise the drawbridge intentionally without feeling like they're becoming cybersecurity technologists. And so it's really all about simple English language, simple steps. So that's actually, I've had people even tell me it was fun and easy, and that was the greatest compliment of all.
Yeah, that's great. And is it safe to say that more people's information is already out there than they even realize? It's just maybe not being used by anyone yet, or
Uh,
once they have it, is it pretty much that's when you know?
it is out. I was on a morning TV show, and they were saying, they were quoting me back to myself, saying, you've been quoted as saying that you should stop protecting your social security number. And I said, well, that is true. I did say that. The reason I said that is the emphasis is not on protecting it, because you have to assume it's already out and has been sold and shared 1,000 times. What you need to be doing is focus on protecting it being used against you. On the dark web, our government resources and some of the top cyber companies who get on the dark web and evaluate what's there have estimated that there's over 300 million social security numbers there. Well, we have 330 million people in the United States. So the math is not in your favor that you are not one of the ones that has been breached. So if your social security number is out there with your name, your date of birth, and a lot of these things, even if the date of birth isn't hacked, a lot of people have it on their Facebook accounts and all of this. So it's very easy with all of the computer aided tools and now the new AI tools for hackers to piece together everything they need to know to access most of your accounts. And so, with that in mind, what you really need to do is take a defensive posture and protect yourself from assuming you're being attacked. The average person has, as you and I are talking, we're all literally going through hundreds of attacks today. It's just they're not being successful until one is. And so it's really like a very long term game of Russian roulette. And you want to protect yourself before that full cartridge comes your way.
Yeah, and even to even to the most basic thing, like people say like you should be changing your passwords for all of your various sites and stuff like every so often. Like that, it really is that important. I can tell you from my experience, there was one moment where all of a sudden I got an email that my username or no, my password had changed on a certain site, and I was like, absolutely not. I absolutely did not do that. And
Mm,
then I got a notification that my username had been changed from the same site, and I was able to
uh,
contact their customer support immediately. Got a really nice gentleman, thank goodness, who was able to validate my identity and changed everything again very, very quickly. And then I obviously went through and changed literally every password to everything I had.
That is so great because you were actually witnessing somebody hacking your account real
Yes,
time,
but if I hadn't been in a position where I could like respond to that immediately,
right?
what a mess that would have been.
And that's what most people are in because we're all busy with our lives and work and everything else and travel.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you can have an email comes in that says your password's been changed. And if that's one of the 200 emails you're getting in your Yahoo or Gmail account or whatever that you're too busy to look at until the end of the day, the damage is already done by the time you see it, if you see it. And a lot of people don't even turn on those alerts to get them at all. So a lot of times things happen and they don't find out about it for weeks or even months. And the longer you wait, the worse the damage becomes generally. That's the rule of thumb.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that was a great example. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah, and everything you're doing, like I said, it's so important and it's so awesome and timely as we're in October, and October is,
National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So it's time for everybody to become more aware and get safer than they are right now.
yeah, it's time for you to, as soon as you're done listening to this, or maybe while you're listening, if you can multitask, to go to smarteronlinesafety.com and check out the website. So, but I'll put everything in the show notes as well, as far as the website, the socials, the YouTube link, and I think they can probably find all of that on the website as well, I assume. But oh yeah, I can see them right here. So, so I want to ask you, I want to find out, because this is a travel story podcast, what kind of travel tips with security that you have. If you have a couple that you can share with us before we get into like the bulk of the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I travel a third of the time. So believe me, I know. And before I got into cybersecurity, AKA before I got hacked myself, I remember taking trips, overseas to Asia and Europe, which is predominantly where I've spent most of my travels. And, invariably having whatever credit card I was using, even for a legitimate hotel or something, have fake charges on it. And more than once, I've had to cancel a credit card while on travel, which is really awkward if you're still planning on using it. So, having to travel with more than one card and just seeing things like that happening and going, wow, this is out of control. What do people supposed to do? So I'm aware of all that. So one of the things that's great, a lot of credit card companies will have ways that you can get a one-time credit card number. So basically it's using your credit card, but it's creating a alias
Like a
credit card
virtual.
number, virtual number that you use once and it won't be valid for a second use. And so it's particularly good if you're doing anything online while you're traveling and having to book your next hotel online, because a lot of people are traveling with Expedia or whatever. And so that's very helpful. And that way you're not actually exposing your physical card and having your real number compromised. So that's very helpful. So setting those up in advance and getting 10 of them. There's also a site, and you know what? I can't remember it off the top of my head. It'll come to me, but I'll give it to you so you can put it in your information for people. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
website. It's an organization that does it, and it lets you set them up for free. And they're a not for profit that's on. They're on grant and donation money, and it's just a bunch of do good cyber protection people who have set this up. So you can get these credit card numbers, and I would recommend you take 10 to 12, have 10 to 12 ready and bring them with you on your trip. The other thing is one of the biggest problems is people use Wi-Fi when they're away, and they're using public Wi-Fi, which is a real no-no with no protections. I can sit in I've done this before, and so have all my my colleagues. You can sit in a Starbucks and basically see everything everybody's doing when you have the skills for that. So, if you're thinking you're sitting at the airport lounge or a Starbucks and you're on any kind of public Wi-Fi and you don't have like a VPN, a virtual public network on your, like NordVPN is a good one, NORD VPN on your laptop to protect. It basically creates a tunnel between what your computer and, the website or account that you're dealing with so that prying eyes can't see. You may as well assume that everybody in the restaurant or connected to the Wi-Fi, they could be two doors down, is looking over your shoulder, seeing everything you're doing. And if you think of it that way, you'll be much more aware of what you should and shouldn't be doing on
Well,
public Wi-Fi.
and in reality, not even just everything you're doing, but they can probably see everything you've done.
Well, there's a lot of that too, yeah, because especially, hackers are, you have to, this is what I tell people, look, unless you are really a hacker level person yourself, which most people aren't, and certainly most of the people that I'm helping are not, and have no desire to be. Most people want nothing to do with cybersecurity. They just want online safety. That's why we even named the company Smarter Online Safety. And we're not. You shouldn't have to become a cybersecurity expert to protect yourself. In order to be safe online, you just need to be aware that all hackers have home turf advantage on your computer. So if you think of it that way, you need to be more cautious. And so by having a VPN, you need to be on. But one of the mistakes people make, they think, okay, good, I'm not going to use public Wi-Fi, but they'll log into private Wi-Fi, meaning that it's password protected. But if it's password protected at the Marriott or the Hyatt or wherever, it is still, you don't know who's on there. And believe me, hackers stay in nice hotels because they make a lot of money. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you can easily have hackers there. You also could be logging into something that is like Marriott Guest 2, which is not even a Marriott um,
Yeah, could
Guest
be
Wi-Fi.
somebody's hotspot or
Somebody
something.
set up a hotspot and called it Marriott Guest 2, and they only have to have it open for a couple hours to get a lot of great information. So you need to know enough to protect yourself, and these are the kinds of mistakes that people make. And one other thing that's coming up a lot now too is, especially when you travel internationally, because people may be a little better at gauging things, plugging your USB into a USB port in a public place instead of putting it into an electric adapter and a plug adapter and plugging it into an actual plug.
Mm-hmm.
Your USB ports, whether they're in hotel rooms or at the airport or whatever, it could be part of what's called juice jacking, which is basically you're plugging in and you are kind of charging, but more importantly, the information on your phone or your laptop is being downloaded over the USB cable. So all your data is being stolen while you are sitting there ostensibly thinking that you are just charging your device. So you really have to be careful when you travel. This is why you want to travel with a power, a brick, a power device to plug into if your battery is getting low. And you always want to have a plug adapter with you, especially for the country you're going to, so that you're not forced to use a USB port that could be questionable. Because to the untrained eye, they're very hard to detect. And it's better just to practice. An ounce of safety is worth a pound of cure, as my grandmother would say.
Wow. Yeah. All great tips. I didn't even think about that. Like, I've absolutely plugged my devices into like a lamp on the
Mhm.
nightstand because it has USB ports on it. And oh, this is convenient.
Yes, right. And
So,
and the hotel probably is not juice jacking you, but the person who went into the room last
yeah.
could easily have set that up. So, that's you got to realize that hackers are really good at what they do, and they know how to get a big reach and a big span of control. And even if that might be the only room in the hotel that has it, but if it's the room you're staying in, it's not going to be pleasant for you. So just avoid things like that, and you're going to have a much better trip abroad.
Yeah. Awesome. Really, 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 really important and really great stuff, especially like you said, with this being a very important month for you.
Yeah.
So, as I think I mentioned to you before we started recording, if you think of anything as we're going along and maybe you're telling stories
Mhm.
and maybe somebody's told you a story or something that happened while they were traveling or, whatever, feel free to bring those up because I think all the tips are very important.
Will do.
I wish I was a tip pod. Maybe I should start like a second spin-off because I do have a lot of people who have a lot of really interesting, people who've traveled for years and years and years have so many
Mhm.
different tips and tricks. So,
Mhm.
but I think there's enough of those podcasts in existence. That's why I did this a different way.
Well, and you've got a very special podcast, so nobody can outdo you, Phil.
Well, thank you. Yeah, tell the world. All right. So before we get into the bulk where we actually, I ask you, where have you been? And we get into the stories, I'm interested to know, when did travel become a thing in your life? Was it when you were young? Did your family travel or did it start later in life? How did that start for you?
Well, let me talk about the bug I got first about travel.
Yeah.
So, and a fun fact about me: my dad was in charge of the 500 children on opening day at Disneyland. He was a youth leader, and this is before I was born. But so he was at Disneyland on opening day with
Oh my
Walt Disney
gosh.
and everybody else in charge of the 500 kids. So what that meant after I was born and growing up is that we lived in Southern California, and we would go to Disneyland once a month. And every time we had visitors, we would take them to Disneyland. And all my dad had to do was call up people he knew, and there'd be this was back when they had tickets before before e-tickets. So you get a ticket book, and so they'd just be waiting in his name for pack per person. And so I spent a lot of time there, and I'm the only person I've ever met, who my favorite ride at Disneyland was and still is It's a Small World.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
and I mean Disney even lost a lawsuit to a guy who got stuck on that ride when it broke down for the pain and suffering of listening to that song over and over for a half hour. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
loved it. I would go on that ride. I would make my family go on that with me twice every time we went. And I would go through and I knew every detail, and I was learning, well, what country is that? Oh, what country is that, based on how people were dressed and whether they had camels or flying carpets or wooden shoes. And so my history lesson and lesson about the world was It's a Small World at Disneyland when I was, 5 and 6. And that planted the bug. And at that time, I really decided I wanted to find out how many countries there were in the world and visit them all. And
Wow.
I'm about halfway through that quest, which is good because I'm about halfway through my life, probably.
That's so great.
So first of all, it was that, and I love people from all over. I've met people, and I've met people from more countries than I've visited, and gotten to work with people. And I lived in Southern California, grew up in L.A. and Hollywood and Santa Barbara, and then moved to Silicon Valley to work in high tech. And I've lived in New Orleans and some other places, and now I travel a third of the time. So with all that traveling, I've met people from all over the world. And in the cities I lived in, there's people from all over the world every day coming
Hmm.
in. So you can't go out to a restaurant or a coffee shop without meeting people with an accent. And I'm the person to say, "Oh, I love your accent. Where are you from?" And sometimes I'll guess, "Oh, are you from Ghana, or are you from, Croatia?" And and I get it right a little more than half the time. And then I'll ask them what they love most. So I'm just a lover of all things culture and
Hmm.
cultural.
Hmm.
And so I did look up, like in the World Atlas. That was my number one book. My parents had this atlas, and I used to take tracing paper and put it over the continents and trace it out, and then take it off the book and write in the countries. I did not learn geography from the U.S. public school system. I learned it
Just
from
self
just
study.
self-study and just a fascination with it. And I think that's why I love traveling. And you learn so much more about yourself
Hmm.
by meeting people who have different norms, different experiences, different beliefs, different food, different religions and everything. And I just think it's the best way to learn about life and about yourself is with people from all over the world.
Yeah, excellent. So, did your family then end up taking you on trips when you were younger, because you developed such a passion for the world, or did you have to kind of do that yourself as you got older?
Well, I had to do that because they didn't actually travel. They hosted a lot of people from all over the world. So I
Hmm.
stayed at home, and the world. My dad used to say, I stay home and the world comes to me. But we had friends who lived all over the world, and so people would come. And when they'd come, they were very thoughtful and gracious. They'd usually bring me a kid's toy. I still have a huge trunk full of the gifts I got, from when I was a child, of you know corn husk dolls from somewhere, and woven beaded dolls from Africa, and hand stitched dolls from Denmark and Holland, and just things from all over, and musical instruments. My family loved music, and my dad was a singer, and we always had music in our house. So I have musical instruments, just even small percussion instruments from South America and Africa, and a flute from Peru. So those the things that I got, and realizing that maybe it's more than one country that has it, but it's unique to this country in a particular way.
Hmm.
And so that was fascinating to me. So I got a lot of that exposure without actually leaving home. And I never traveled overseas until I was in my late 20s.
Wow.
So
Well,
I was
actually,
late to the party, but I knew a lot by the time I got on a plane.
well, for what it's worth, you weren't as late as me. I was, let's see, would have been, I was 30.
Hmm.
No, I was older than that. Oh my gosh, I can't do math. I was 40. I was 40 when
Oh,
I left the country besides Canada.
that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it's nuts. But since I've had my, I think, at least my fair share of travel, and still more to come. But so I think that's awesome, and I think I want to let's get into the title of the episode. Let's get into the bulk here. I want to hear your stories. Jocelyn King, where have you been?
So the first international trip I took was with my oldest sister, who's quite a number of years older than me. Was a teenager when I was born, so she was more like an aunt. And we went to Italy together. And she had always wanted to go to Italy with her husband, my brother-in-law, who was like an uncle. And he had passed away unexpectedly. And so, as she was overcoming, the grief of that and everything, one of the things that she regretted most was they were always going to take a trip to Italy together, and I'd always wanted to go. And and her son, who was grown, said, "Hey, why don't you go?" And he found us this amazing deal on a flight. She lived in New York City at the time. I lived in Southern California, so he found a flight for me too. I mean, it's so funny. You can still get flights like this occasionally, but it was $400 round trip from New York to fly into Rome and then fly out of Milan and back to New York. And for an extra 200 and something, I flew from Southern California to New York. So we went, and this is in the late 90s, and so this is before internet, and and email existed, but you weren't emailing hotels and things like that. So my sister was taking care of the reservations and doing it over fax, and I helped with one thing because there was a wonderful Italian descent man that I worked with who wrote things out. So I said, "Hey, could you help us? We need to send a fax to this hotel my sister wants to stay at, and we just need to say, that we're coming." I told him I was going with my sister, and where we were going to Rome, and we wanted to see sites and stuff. So he wrote in Italian. He wrote something for the fax so that we could secure the dates, and he replied back. The hotel replied back, "Okay, you've got the reservation, so great, we're all set." So we arrive in Rome. We did the overnight red eye flight. We arrive at 7 in the morning. So we're dragging our big suitcases. I overpacked. Anybody relate to this? Your first trip? I took one of those big Texas size. We were going to be there for 3 weeks, so I took a big Texas size suitcase over there, not realizing that in Europe I'd be better off with a small thing and rinsing things out. But that's how you learn. So you've got these big suitcases, and we're taken in Rome to the Pensione, which is so it's on the fifth floor of an apartment building, and it's a hotel up at the hotel floor, up at the fifth floor. So we're dragging these heavy suitcases up the stairs because there's no
Oh
elevator.
my gosh.
And we're exhausted because we didn't sleep on the plane, and we know that they can't check us in right away because it's the morning. We're getting there at like 10 o'clock. After we had been driven around by a taxi cab driver who clearly was padding the padding the trip because we passed the same intersection 3 times. We're going,
Oh,
okay, so
jeez.
we had some of that funny stuff going on. So we're exhausted. We just want to drop our bags off and go get some coffee and just be able to look around and say, all right, we made it. So we can't wait to just get into the hotel, check our bags with them, and then. So we walk in, and the gentleman who greets us is Italian. He does speak some English, and he says hello, and he's looking at us not in a welcoming way, but in a confused way. And we said, "Oh, I know we're early. We're checking in." Oh, and by the way, I had taken an conversational Italian class at the local UC extension near where I lived, and so I spoke enough to be dangerous, So I
Hmm.
was speaking pidgin Italian with him, and then realized he spoke some English.
Could I ask you real quick, like what time of year, time of month this might have been?
Oh, this is helpful. Thank you. So we were here, it was in March, and it was third week of March or so. So it
Okay.
was in pre-springtime, and in fact, we were going to be in Italy over Easter, which was part of the fun. We said, well, that's great, big
Oh,
Catholic
wow.
tradition. We're going to be in Rome, and
Mm-hmm.
Easter in Rome. That's a little bit of a thing there.
Yeah.
So we were there, and so it was cool, but it was, and it was still having a little bit of rain during the time we were there. It was cool, but it was definitely leading into spring, and so it's not. So it's a week before the peak of Easter week, but so we're checking. So we're trying to check in, and that was the other reason it was so hard, is so many places were booked. So we're starting to check in, and I know that he's looking at us like it's too early, to check in. And I said, well, we just want to leave our bags and come back at check-in time. And he says, well, I'm sorry, we're fully booked. And we said, no, no, we have a reservation. He says, no, we're full. We're not expecting anybody. And, we're completely booked. And my sister and I are looking at each other, jet lagged, exhausted, going, oh no, this can't be happening to us. So we're going back and forth. She's desperately looking for the confirmation emails and stuff. We pull it out, including the one from my, Italian friend at work. And he reads it. He says, "Oh, I see, I see. Due sorelle. That's two sisters." He says, "I heard two sisters were coming. I thought you were nuns." So because we weren't nuns walking in habits, he was sure that we were full, and he couldn't take us. So that was
Oh,
my very
gosh.
first day of my first trip abroad. That was fun.
That is not where I thought it was going to go. The reason I actually asked about the time of the year and time of month was
Mm-hmm.
because I thought it was going to maybe be something with the date and the month, the day and the month being flipped.
Because yes, because in Europe they put the day, the month, and the year, and we put the month, the day, and the year. That happens all
Yeah,
the time. Like 3/6 to us in US is March 6th, and 3/6 in Europe is June 3rd.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I thought maybe would have happened. But then I thought better because your friend was Italian, so I figured he would have done it. He would have done it the right way. So
Oh, but that happens to people. I know that. And
yeah,
I've worked in global companies like Intel and other places where you're dealing with everybody, and invariably something gets mixed up. There's some date that's set, and because again, we're different cultures, different preferences, things get lost in translation, as they would say.
that's fantastic. How was Rome for you guys? Did you go and did you go elsewhere? I mean, 3 weeks is a long time.
No, we did. We spent a week in Rome, and that was incredible. And I had grown up watching like Roman Holiday with Audrey Hepburn every time it came on TV and stuff, and and all kinds of movies about Rome and the Colosseum. And we had been reading, the book. We had the eyewitness books and the all the different travel books. And so just looking and thinking, wow, we're going to be standing in front of the Colosseum, and and the Trevi Fountain and all these things. And, especially for those of us in the United States, something that's 200 years old here is considered practically ancient.
Hmm.
And there, that's still new.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that was what was so wonderful about my first trip abroad, was just realizing, wow, the what we say is old and what they say is old, we're on two different scales. And so that was mind expanding, and that was great. We spent a week there. We went to the Vatican, and we went to the fountains and the Colosseum, and it was just incredible. And the people were so gracious and helpful. And I'd speak a little bit of Italian, and I didn't know how to conjugate verbs or say past tense or future tense. So I'd use the future, I'd use the current tense and say yesterday or tomorrow, and they'd understand what I meant.
Hey, that works.
Yes, I go yesterday, and they're like, okay, I know what you mean. So they were so gracious and helpful, and we had a lot of fun there. And then we rented a car and drove through Tuscany for a week.
Oh, so I haven't been to Tuscany. I've been to Italy twice, but never to Tuscany.
Tuscany is great, and especially in the spring, it was just gorgeous. Everything was starting to bloom, and driving was fun. I know a lot of people don't want to drive when they're in other countries, but
Hmm.
and you don't have to. You could certainly take a bus or do whatever. But it was really fun that we could just stop where we wanted, when we wanted. Like pull over. Oh, there's an olive oil place. Let's go there and just see, and wine tasting and things like that. So we
Which,
stayed in.
by the way, if you've never tried, I know you. I assume you have, but listeners, if you have never tried freshly made olive oil,
Oh yes. Oh
it's
my
a
gosh.
life.
Nothing
It can be.
Yeah, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. So it's true, and it's so healthy for you. Your body just feels like it got a, it got a shot of life some
Yeah,
days.
yeah.
So yeah, so we and we went to Florence. So we got to see the beautiful Duomo there, which is their big cathedral. That one looks like a giant, you know, cake. It's beautiful. There's so much black and white marble that's just it's just jaw dropping. It's huge slabs that are stacked on top of each other, and make all these columns. But in Florence, the Duomo there is this beautiful soft green and kind of like a pinkish shade. They're very very much like Easter candy colors, if you will, and it was just gorgeous. And you go inside, and all the work by all the greats is just spectacular. And then and when you're in Florence, there's so much art to see, and it was just incredible. So between being in Florence and Tuscany, and then we also went to Siena. I love Siena. Siena is a little bit of a tourist trap during the day. It's the place where all the buses come into from Rome and stuff, and for people to go shopping for the day. We went and stayed there. And what was really neat was at the end of the day, all the buses and tourists would leave, and there'd just be locals and the handfuls of people that were staying over. And it felt very much like a small little town. It was charming and wonderful food. There's plenty of food to be had that's not tourist trap food, like really authentic pasta, the way the Italians would have it, fresh made, incredible sauces, and just some of the most mouth-watering food you could ever have,
Yeah.
and
Thanks a
everything
lot, because
close.
you're making me hungry and bringing me back to some of the meals that I've had there. And oh gosh,
Yeah, yeah, it
so
was it
good.
was great. And then we went to San Gimignano, which is one of the tiny towns. There's all these medieval towns that still have the tall spires from the castles. And this one, I think, if I'm not mistaken, so somebody can fact check me, but this one had the most spires still standing. And so when you go there, when you think of a medieval fort or castle, and you think of all the you know the spires coming up, this one had so many of them, each of them representing a different wealthy home, wealthy family living in there. And there was a restaurant there that was actually built into the caves. And so when we went to dinner, we were sitting in an area that was like one little part of a cave. If you picture going out like hiking into a cave, and you know how there's little areas off of the main tunnel.
Hmm.
Well, they had those, and they made them into that. They put a table and chairs in it, and you could seat four people in there comfortably. And it was beautifully decorated. I mean, it was definitely like a four-star restaurant, but it was literally built into an ancient cave. So it was cool from the earth. In the summer, it would be a fantastic place to go because it's everything underground, and the earth is always 55-degree cave.
Yeah.
Any cave in the world is 55 degrees. So it was just spectacular, and had an incredible meal, and yeah, just wonderful. And again, wonderful people. And the other thing that I loved, having grown up in California, where a lot of people don't walk, and you have to kind of have a car to drive around, which also means you don't always feel safe walking around. So whether you're walking the streets of Los Angeles or San Francisco or whatever, you've got to keep your, keep sharp all the time, like you're in a city. And I've been to New York a lot, and the same thing. But there, you could walk around these towns, and you just felt really safe, And here we are, two women walking around, and if I had been solo, I still would have felt safe. It was a wonderful. It was the first time I experienced that, frankly, of really feeling safe. Just walking around, and there's enough people walking around that you feel the safety in numbers. So I loved that part of the culture, and how people took walks after dinner,
Hmm.
and just it was such a healthy and relaxed way. And I've been back to Italy since. I was just there a little over a year ago, and it's the same way. Even in modern times with cell phones and smartphones everywhere and stuff, you still have this relaxed pace, and after dinner, walks
And
and
I'm not sure
networking.
about those other places that you went, but as my recollection of Rome, although it's been, I think, 9 years now since I was there, but
Mhm.
my recollection of Rome was it's very flat for the most part.
Yes,
And
yes,
so it's so walkable and it's so beautiful. I mean, yeah.
it
So
was spectacular. Yeah.
I'm not typically a
Mhm.
big walker, but when I'm in a place like that, I walk everywhere that I can.
Yeah. And boy, for people who are trying to get their 10,000 steps in every day, it's really easy to do in
Oh
Italy.
yeah, yeah. 30,000 is easy.
And
Yeah,
I highly recommend in Florence getting to the museums. It was just stunning. I mean, you could just, these masterworks, and you're like, oh, now I see what all of this is about. Things that you see pictures of in a book, to then stand in front of the painting and see the 3D quality of the layers of paint, and the artistry, and the cracking of the paint and the patina. And it was just, you're like, wow. So now when I see, postcards or pictures of those paintings in books, where I see the original in my head now, whereas before travel, I was just aware that, okay, this is a beautiful painting. But after you see these things in person, then it becomes a recollection of a beautiful memory. And that's what I love about travel also.
yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah. So then from there we went to Venice, because you have to, so we were in Florence,
Mm-hmm.
and then we went to Venice, and that was spectacular.
Absolutely.
And we were there at a good time of year, because I understand from everybody who's been there in the summer, it does stink to high heaven, and it doesn't when you go in the early spring, or the late fall or winter. And so it also wasn't crowded yet,
Yeah.
because it wasn't full on season.
We were there last year in June, I think it was, and it was still not hot enough. It was hot when we were there, but it
Mhm.
did. I did not notice smell.
That's
Just a
good.
lot of people.
That's great. That's
Yeah,
great. Yeah, and just going around St. Mark's Square. And one thing that was really great, we got a guide, and there was this wonderful English woman from England, with a charming accent and total history buff, and she had lived there for 5 years, and she was a guide. And we hired her. And the thing about a really great guide is they tell you these little stories, like, on the church in St. Mark's Square. I wasn't aware, until we did this tour on second to last day, that the I want to say the line, the gold statue at the top, had actually been taken from Constantinople, now Istanbul, during a raid, and brought back. And so this history of Venice, and and the conquering, and the spoils that had come to Venice from various places on earth, guides really are good at telling stories about those types of things, and it's fascinating. And then you never see it the same way. Even when I see a picture of the church now, I still see that, and I go, oh, that's the treasure from Istanbul that they stole. So this is a great storytelling moment.
yeah. I'll second that as far as guides go. And I most places that I go now, I will try to find a guide for like some sort of a walking tour, whether it's a food tour or just a sightseeing. But I love getting a guide and doing a walking tour of a place because you get, like you said, you get so much information and stories that,
Right.
not even necessarily history, but just stories of, things to do, things people have done and seen. And yeah,
Right.
so I love
And
that
now
stuff.
there's so many great reviews of people. Like, you can read, whether it's a Get Your Guide, or whoever, that you're getting your guide from, you can read other people who have been on the tour, and they say, oh, Sandra was amazing, or whatever. And so you can even ask for certain people. I've done that, where I've called and said, oh, when is so and so going to be available? And they said, well, she's not working on Tuesday, but she's in on Wednesday. Said, great, I want to be in Wednesday. And so I love being able to read the reviews, and being able to compare the different guides themselves and the guide companies themselves to each other, to decide what experience I want. Because back in the day, it was kind of hit or miss.
Yeah. And then you said you flew back out of
Milan. So we went from
Milan. That's
Venice.
right.
We took the train from Venice. So when we had dropped off the rental car before we went to Venice, and we were in Venice for 3 days, and that was wonderful. And did the whole, canal, and we walked every inch of the place. Our feet were screaming at us when we left, but it was so much fun. And then we took the train from Venice back to Milan, and we spent 36 hours in Milan. So we had to kind of rush around to see the cathedral. There is incredible, because it's pre-Renaissance, it's Gothic, And so it has the Gothic architecture instead of the Renaissance architecture, and then it has all of these wonderful Renaissance paintings, and um, and that was a lot of fun. And we were going to be leaving. I want to say we were leaving on a Tuesday morning. We had to get up at 5 in the morning, so we said, okay, we'll go get some early dinner on Monday night and then go back and go to sleep. Well, while we were out at the restaurant, there were people there who were jazz musicians and singers and people who love jazz, and they were out because they had had a special class with a New York American jazz pianist who had come, and he was teaching the class. And so they all were going out to a club that night, and we were going to hear great jazz. And I actually at the time I was singing. I was working full time, but I was a jazz singer and had a quartet that I sang with.
Oh,
So
wow.
jazz. So we went out and we we were having such a good time. We said, well, we're either going to go back to the hotel and try to get 5 hours of sleep now, or we're going to stay up all night and stay here. And we decided to stay up all night. And I got to sing. It was fun. I got to sing
Oh, no way.
and all these Italian jazz musicians and artists I got connected to, and I got to meet the New Yorker who was a professional jazz musician in New York and played on albums and with great people and so that was a great way to end the trip, bringing the New York jazz scene to Milan and getting to be part of that. And so they were up until 2 a.m. and we stayed up with them.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, so that was fun. So then we went back to the hotel, and the hardest part was keeping ourselves awake from 3 to 4:30 in the morning. And there was a night manager downstairs, so we went down and they had a little sitting area, and we were just sitting there talking to him, and he appreciated it because he had nothing else to do except this is he didn't have a cell phone. This is back in the day. So we were talking to him, and he didn't speak a lot of English, so I got to get my final practice of my Italian in, which was fun. And um, and and then we left at 4:30 in the morning for the airport and flew back to New York, and it was the most incredible 3 weeks and 2 days that I'd ever had, and to for that to be my first trip abroad was just spectacular.
So awesome. Did you get to actually sleep on the flight this time?
We did, yeah. We were so exhausted we fell asleep. That was
Yeah, I
awesome.
thought you might. No, that's so great. And I love stories like that of meeting strangers and kind of tagging along and how I find that so many memories end up starting with meeting somebody, whether it's another traveler or a local, and some really great things can happen when you do that and you're willing to put yourself out there and have a conversation or whatever.
Right. Oh, there was a funny thing that happened. I just remembered when we were in Florence. It was raining, and we went into a cafe. And the thing is, Italians smoke a lot, and they smoke indoors. And I'm not big on cigarette smoke. And being from California, we didn't even have it. You're not allowed to smoke indoors anymore at public places. So going inside and breathing all the smoke, like my eyes are burning and things like that. But that was the only way to get out of the rain. So we found this one cafe where there wasn't too much smoke, and my sister and I are sitting there, and we start talking to this couple, and they're from Sweden, and he's German and she's Swedish. And I had been ordering in Italian, and I have a really good accent. Apparently, I sound like a local. And so then when I started speaking English to my sister, they introduced themselves, and we just started chatting. And they asked, "How long have you lived in Italy?" And we said, "Oh, we're just visiting." And they're like, "Where from?" And he's from the and they said, "Well, you don't sound like Americans." And it was so funny because I love being an American, but that was like a big
That's a
compliment.
compliment.
We felt
Yeah.
that we didn't look like we weren't dressed like Americans. My sister and I both dressed more, I guess, European fashionably, if you will. We weren't wearing, we were wearing walking shoes that were kind of, and stuff, but they looked dressier, that we weren't wearing sneakers, and white American Nikes and stuff. So
Hmm.
it was a great fun compliment, and for she and I to get that from Europeans was just a fun moment.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. I would love that. I, when I go places, I do like to learn at least, please, thank you, yes, no, the basics. But I'm talking words, not necessarily full on phrases or
And
sentences or,
always learn cheers. Always learn cheers so that you can
yeah,
toast.
Yeah, and when I'm if I'm in a place more than a few days or a couple of days, I will try to pick up on local like slang or something that's
Mhm.
commonly said, and but yeah. So, but I think it matters, and I think it shows that you made an effort, just to at least get the basics.
You know, it was so
So,
fun too. I learned things there. To your point, I learned some local slang. So when I came back, I don't know, it was sometime later. I went to an Italian restaurant with friends, and I was able to order in Italian. Per cominciare, ci porti uno. I was able to say, to start, we'd like this or that. And I ordered water, a bottle of water, and they said, still or with bubbles, con gaso, or
hmm
still. And I said, frizzante per favore. Frizzante is how Italians say sparkling, and so I said,
nice.
frizzante per favore, and they were like, oh, and she smiled. She says, oh, you've been to Italy.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so that's
It
fun.
feels good to do that. I think it's great.
It's like a little insider wink, or handshake.
Yeah,
It's fun.
yeah. So you've spent other time in Europe. I'm very interested to hear about any time you've spent in Asia, but where else in Europe have you been, just out of curiosity?
So I've been to France and Paris in particular, which was spectacular, and got to the Louvre, and which is absolutely a must see. That was on my bucket list. I never thought I'd get there, frankly. I don't know why, but it's just I'd never gotten there in years, and just really wanted to go. And but getting to the Louvre was just really spectacular, and just walking around the bridges, and going to the Eiffel Tower, and getting a picture below the Eiffel Tower, and then going up. It was too windy that day to go up to the higher elevation on the tower, but we were able to go up to. It's kind of like they call it like the second floor, but it's pretty high up. But it's at the base, before the spire goes up.
hmm
But it's still an incredible view of the city, and it's 360. And a storm was coming in, so it was pretty windy. So we were just enjoying that, and had a drink at the little bar up there. And Paris was wonderful, and it was funny because I had taken French in junior high and high school, which is funny. I grew up in California. If I'd taken Spanish, I could use it every day. I took French, which I've used 3 times in my life.
Yep, I'm right there
And they
with you.
always Okay, and they always said, "Oh, you can't speak French in Paris because they'll correct you." And two things. One is I learned from my French teacher. She said, "Well, it's not so much that we're being rude. I mean, when French people hear other French people pronounce things incorrectly, they correct them. It's the pride of our language," she told me. And so we correct each other. But then, when Americans and other foreigners come in and they're butchering it, we really have to correct them. And so I said, oh, okay, well, I can kind of understand that now. So they're not being rude and singling you out. They would do that if you were French. So I enjoyed learning that. But then what actually happened was I said hello and table for two, and ordered and everything in French. And they were very gracious and spoke back to me and stuff. And, weren't the rumors were not true, and I did this in more than one place. So
Or you
I
just did an excellent job.
but it was fun to actually finally use those 2.5 years of French for something.
Right. It
Mhm.
is funny though that so I couldn't speak it today, but there are if I hear somebody speaking French, I can kind of pick up some things still to this day and sort of understand what they're saying, and then it starts to
Mhm.
kind of come back a little bit by bit.
That's great. Mhm.
But yeah,
And
I
now,
took it
and
for
one
almost
thing.
4 years.
Well, one thing now too. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Duolingo and several of these apps. I have 3 apps on my phone. And when I'm going to travel someplace, I just
hmm
start doing, for 2 to 4 weeks before, I just start doing a daily thing to get some basics down and train my ear. And, and it's sometimes it's hard because, when you're taking time off and you're getting ready to go, you're busier than usual, but it does a couple of things. One is, not only am I so glad I did it once I land, but it's also part of the anticipation. A huge part of travel is not just actually landing and being there, it's the anticipation of it in advance and the remembering it when you get back. So don't cut yourself short on the fun and anticipation of the preparation of going. It's part of the adventure, and if you think of it as part of your trip instead of the have to checklist before your trip, you have a lot more fun. I found. I learned that.
I agree 1,000%. Yeah, my my trips start months before, and sometimes a year before I actually go on them.
Excellent. That's
Yeah,
great. That is great. Everybody listening, follow that advice. You're gonna love your trip so much more. It's so great.
yeah, absolutely. Make yourself some sort of a loose itinerary and then be flexible.
Yes,
So
yeah.
yeah.
And so where else I've been to Slovenia. I've
Mm,
been to Austria, both in the country and in Vienna. And I was there around the holidays, so I got to experience the Christmas markets.
Christmas markets in Vienna are
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes, that was incredible. And it's fun. And the other thing I like to do, I always like to pack with the right clothing, but leave something. I got great packing advice one time. They said, pick 3 days, like a dinner out kind of day, a special meal out, a walking around museums day, and one other day, depending on what you're doing. If you're going to a beach resort in the summer, or if you're going skiing in the winter, but pick something and create 3 outfits for that, and then just augment them a little. And then before you close your suitcase, pull one thing out of your suitcase. And I love that hack because I like to go very small. In fact, I just do carry-ons now. Even when I do a 2-week trip to Europe, I do a carry-on. I don't check my bags anymore. I've had too many cases of lost bags.
Hmm.
So I just do a carry-on, and you really can get everything in a carry-on. So that giant Texas size suitcase that I had, it's long gone. It's half that size now. And and what I love about that is then I always like to buy something when I'm overseas, because not only do I get to wear it there. So like I think I bought a winter scarf in Vienna, and to this day I have it, and I get to pull it out in the winter, and it brings back these fond memories. And then I get something while I'm there, and I add, instead of bringing everything I might possibly need. It's really nice to go without something and buy something when you're
That's really cool. And then every time you put it on, you've got memories.
I do. I have, scarves and jewelry and gloves and clothes and even some shoes that I bought overseas that I still love to this day.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then I've
Um,
also been to Denmark,
hmm.
which was wonderful. Um, I had a grandparent from Denmark, and so I heard about it and had never been, and didn't go, and it was amazing. It was so different. Scandinavia is incredible, and I'd not been to Sweden or Norway or anything yet, so getting there, it was, the people are so warm. It's very much a community feel. People are very socially conscious of being nice to each other. Like even I noticed, like, people clean up after themselves, and so they don't leave things dirty, which I see a lot of when I come back to the States after one of these trips. I'm always like, oh my gosh, we always, we're always making a mess for the person after us, thinking, well, somebody's going to clean it up. But in a lot of parts of Europe in particular, people are more tidy, and they also are just more conscientious of being gracious and nice to the people around them and the person after them. And so it's just nice to see those little types of things. But I loved, again, the museums. There's an amazing museum there that has realistic talking, AI figures that are from, the Scandinavian, sailing days and stuff like this. And so it's
Oh,
just
cool.
really so fun to hear them talking to you. I actually thought it was a real person standing there from, halfway across the room. And I come up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's animatronic. But it's not like animatronic from the Disneyland days that are
Hmm.
clearly, these are really amazing. And they were built from DNA samples of
Wow.
skeletons. And so they basically recreated, they used the DNA to put together the actual features that they had, and then they recreated that with, like, Hollywood, level precision on making it lifelike. And so there's things like that that are really, really fun. And the food is amazing. Oh my gosh, I am a foodie, and thank gosh I walk a lot. I mean, I'd be 300 pounds, but I would, but I love food, and I love, being active. And so I just love getting to taste things. And it's always fun to sample something that's unique to that country, and in Denmark, all the cheeses and the pastries and the coffees and everything that they love are just, they taste different than anywhere else. So
Yeah.
I love that. And then I was in Amsterdam very recently, in just a couple of months ago, for the first time, and that was amazing. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" I was there, and I got to visit a friend who had moved there 7 years ago, and he and his wife retired there, and my partner and I stopped, and we had dinner with him, and he took us to his favorite restaurant and was incredibly gracious. And I could just see why, I said, well, do you miss, the States at all? He says, nope. And he said all the reasons why. And he goes back to visit and stuff, but he just absolutely loves it. And the one thing that Amsterdam and Denmark have in common, and I would say Amsterdam and Copenhagen have in common is they are bike centered cities. In
Hmm.
fact, they really encourage bikes. Like, to own a car in either of those countries, the taxes, the price is so expensive, and then the taxes are just so high. It's really for you know the the elite, and that way it really encourages public transportation from their rail systems and bicycles. And I have to tell you, at rush hour, you go out, you got to be careful on a bike lane because people are going fast and they know where they're going, and they know how to get around each other. But you could get taken out by a 25 mile per hour bike really easily if you don't look the right direction. So
And bikes there have the right of way over pedestrians, right?
they do. Yes, exactly. So you gotta be practice caution, but it is spectacular and really down to earth people. Just really love that.
That's another place. I've not been there myself, but I do plan to go there at some point. There's so many places to get to.
Right.
But
Well, and let me add museums again because we went to the Van Gogh Museum, Van
mhm.
Gogh Museum,
Did you do the
and
Anne Frank house?
yeah, we did the Anne Frank House, which
Yeah.
was incredible. That was really
I've
amazing.
never heard anyone say anything other than just how moving it was. And
It
yeah.
is. It is. And what that family went through, and her father in particular, having lost everyone in his family, his wife and children, and what he did in preserving her memory and in writing about her and dedicating the rest of his life to her message is just one of the most incredible human feats you'll ever witness. And getting to see him speak on the videos and things like that is just really powerful. And to be in the actual house and walking around and being in the room where they were hiding and had to be quiet during the day, because if anybody heard them, it was over. It's just to actually, it's one thing to hear about it and imagine it or to watch a movie about it, but to stand in the room where she was for all those years in hiding and imagine having to go through that yourself, you can't experience it any other way but being there.
Oops, I was muted. So amazing, and that's definitely high on my list to get there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I can't believe we've been talking for over an hour. Let's. Do you have? I hate to. I feel so like we're cheating people of your stories and your experiences because I know you have so many. Maybe we'll have to do a part two sometime down the road, but
I'd be happy to. That would be great. This
that
is fun. Yeah,
would be awesome. Can you just tell us maybe a couple of your like favorite stories of experiences you've had in Asia? Because I just
absolutely.
it's that's besides New Zealand, which is where my daughter lives right now, and I haven't been yet. Besides
Right.
New Zealand, Japan is probably and Vietnam are two like very high on my list. But
I have not been to Vietnam yet, but a good friend of mine is from Vietnam and Vietnamese, and we're going to go together. So maybe I'll come back after that and tell you all about it. But I've been to India, all over India. I've been to Singapore. I've been to China. I've been to Japan. Let me talk about Japan because I was just there in April of this year because they're having in Osaka, they're having the International Exposition, aka used to be known as the World's Fair for 200 years. And so the International Exposition goes on every 5 years, and it was last in Dubai, and it's going to be in Riyadh in 5 years. But it was in Japan. 8 countries were there, each building a pavilion or having a space on the trade show floor of like a 10 by 20 booth, in essence, with talking about their country and the initiatives that they're doing around technology, human healthcare, and environment. And so they could pick one or all of those themes. And there were the most incredible pavilions built. And these things are being torn down after. So it's from the middle of April to the middle of October of this year. We were there, I want to say like it was the second week, and which was fascinating because they were still figuring everything out and getting it rolling. But 158 countries. There were three of them weren't finished being set up yet. There were a couple that were still having to wait for permits and get the inspectors and stuff, so they couldn't be open. But we went to 152 countries, booths or pavilions with people from those countries in 4 days. That
Wow.
was an incredible around the world in 4 days.
So awesome.
2 countries. It was incredible. And then some of the places like the Saudi Arabian pavilion, which was incredible. It's like it was almost a small city. And the German pavilion and stuff all had restaurants inside of them. So you could get this incredible food like you were in the country right there. And you felt like you were in the country. They made the restaurant look like you were in the so you really got a time travel or space travel to that country while you were having that meal. And then you'd walk out and go into another country that was in a completely different continent. So it was absolutely incredible.
How
And
did
I've
you
heard,
choose as a foodie? Like, where do we pick up some food from and where don't we? Out of maybe not every place had restaurants, but
yeah,
still,
they
like
don't
that
all
would be
have
so hard to choose.
it was. So part of it, and well, part of it was some of them would have lines that were like 3 hours long. So part of it would be picking where to go and how long things were.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we just picked a couple places where we said we absolutely have to do this. We got to, so we're going to go first thing in the morning, or we're going to go last thing, in the day. I encourage everybody to look it up and look on Osaka International Expo just to see the pictures. Do it on YouTube and see the videos. It's just phenomenal what they did. And they built, okay, Japan built an island to host this thing on. That's how, okay, they built an island off of Osaka,
Oh my god.
and that island's going to stay. And actually, for the next 50 years, China has full use of it. And after that, it goes back to the Japanese. And all of these, we were in the Netherlands. We were in the Netherlands pavilion, and it was incredible. They did it all about water. And having just been to Amsterdam 2 months before this, we got to go. In Amsterdam, we drove to on the ocean side of the country where they have the giant dam. 2/3 of the Netherlands would be underwater if it weren't for their water systems to keep the
Mm-hmm.
water out. So you get on this causeway bridge where you're looking at the ocean on your right, and then you're looking at the country on the left, and the water level's 30 feet lower.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And so learning all about that water system and then being there at the Netherlands pavilion, it was all based on water. And these things were all, it wasn't just like you were visiting the country. It wasn't like an Epcot Center. It was, they're talking about what they're doing around the environment or AI or technology and health or healthcare. And the Netherlands focused on the environment and what they're doing with rising water levels and with water. And it's just an incredibly moving experience. You're experiencing things through sound and light and technology, and it's really hard to describe. You kind of have to see it.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But going there, and then they had live music from people from all over the world. So different bands. You'd have a band from Europe, and then you'd have a whole dance group and musical group from Nigeria right after, and then you'd have something from Saudi Arabia up next, or modern singer from Saudi Arabia up next who's doing modern pop music, and it was just one thing after the other. It was such a buffet.
Mm,
It was really a smorgasbord of the world. It was incredible.
so
And so I'm so
awesome.
glad I went. Yeah. And it's really one of those things. And then they're tearing everything down at the end. It'll never be seen again in this form. So that was pretty amazing. And I loved being in Japan because the Japanese culture is so very different from the American Western culture. And I've worked with Japanese people for almost 20 years through being in high tech in Silicon Valley. There's always been a Japanese office that I've gotten to travel to, and I always cherish my visits to Japan and any interactions with Japanese people. They're just so lovely and conscientious, and as I was saying, the more you learn about another culture, the more you learn about yourself. I think Americans can learn a lot about us as a culture and as a society, and us as individuals, by interacting with anything Japanese, because we're as individualistic as we are. They are, community based. So we're kind of on opposite ends of some of the spectrum in some areas like that. And to get to see how focused they are on, the better good for everybody is higher than the individual good, which is different than how we are in America. And I may not be describing this in the best way, but when you experience the difference, you realize what I'm talking about. But I just love Japanese culture, Japanese food. We wanted to see sumo wrestling, but sumo wrestling season wasn't then. It's like any sports. There's a season
Hmm.
for it. But through one of these guide um, places, we looked up. I was able to find that you could go to. I can't remember what they're called. It's where it's the houses where they live and train, and so the sumo wrestlers are training, and it's called a stable. And so you can go, and there's usually 10 in a stable, at least ones we were at. And so we got to go to the morning workout of them. And look, we're sitting on little, little mats on the ground, and they're like 10 feet away from us. And they are sumo wrestling. They are sparring. And we lucked out because that particular day, another stable had come. They had, five of their people came over and five of us left. So we got to see them, two different groups, compete with each
Yeah,
other.
sort of like scrimmage.
It was very much like a scrimmage, and it was incredible. And these are big guys, as
Yeah,
I say. And
yeah.
then the men in our group got to. We all took our shoes off when we came in, but the men in the group got to, if they want to take their socks off, they could go down and actually do a workout with the men. The women weren't allowed to because of restrictions that way. But I just
Hmm.
enjoyed staying up and taking pictures and watching this, and that was incredible. So that's a fun thing to do if you go to Japan.
That's awesome.
So I really loved the trip to Japan. And I think one other thing that we had briefly touched on was India. And I just have to say, India is one of my favorite countries. It is a country of extremes and of extreme beauty and extreme graciousness and stuff. And what I mean by extremes is you've got extreme poverty and extreme wealth. Um, and you're just really aware of these opposites. And so I flew into Delhi in the north and got to go. My childhood dream from going on It's a Small World ride, I wanted to see the Taj Mahal in India since I was 5 years old. And here I am, a few decades later, finally getting there and actually walking around the Taj Mahal, and it was incredible. The marble and looking at it and just going, how on earth did they build it?
Mm-hmm.
And then going to the Red Fort next door, which is the fort that would guard it, and the history of both of these incredible buildings is just so worth it. If you get anywhere near the northern India, you want to go. In fact, that was what was so funny. We weren't supposed to be in northern India at all. We were supposed to be in central and south. And I said, well, could we go in early and go to the Taj Mahal, because I'd wanted to do that since I was 5. And it's kind of like somebody coming from Europe saying, "Hey, we're going to be in Chicago and New York. Can't we squeeze in San Francisco?" It's nowhere near. It's nowhere near. And a few of us wanted to go. This was actually when I was in my master's program, MBA program, and we were doing international business was our emphasis. So we were there for that. So we flew in 5 days early and spent time in the north and getting to see that. And then we flew down to the middle of the country in Chennai and Madurai, and went to that's more in the south. We went to Bangalore, which is in the center, and that's where the tech hub is. That's where all of the Intels and Microsofts and everybody have their India operations. And so we were there, and we did a presentation there and stuff for our program. And then we flew to Chennai and Madurai, and then we went down to Goa. And Goa is a religious site and capital in the south, and it's beautiful, and it's right on the water. It's even been featured in a couple of movies. And so it's funny. I meet a lot of Indian people in the U.S., and I've never been to Yellowstone. And one of the things we'll always joke is all the Indian people I meet who live in America, they've been to Yellowstone, and I haven't. But I've been to Goa, and they haven't. And so we have a little joke about that. They say, "You've been to Goa?" And I said, "Yes." So that's one of the fun things about travel and culture. Is not just the experience of it, but how you get to share it in conversations with other people that you meet later. I find that to be one of the most delightful things about sharing stories about where people have traveled. One of the questions I often ask people when I first meet them, I don't just ask, "What do you do for a living?" I'm like, "Oh, what do you, what's something in your life right now that you really are loving doing?" That's a great question, because sometimes it's
Mm,
work, sometimes it's play. So I start with that, not what do you do? And another question I ask is, so of all the places you've traveled, what do you like most? Now, I'm sure you probably ask people that, Bill, but most of us don't. So it's a
right?
great question. It's a great question to ask. And invariably, things come up about what they like, and we find, and I think what travel does at the end of the day, and these travel experiences, no matter how wide and vast or small and seemingly insignificant we think they are, they open us up to connecting with other people in ways that other things don't. And I think that the sharing of travel experiences and cultures and the funny circumstances, like my sister and I being due sorelle, being two nuns in Rome, at the end of the day, all those little stories that we get to share with each other help us make new friends out of everyone we meet.
Yep, absolutely, 1000%. I had mentioned earlier I have a heart out. However, this is so much fun. I already told somebody you got to wait a few minutes. So because I just want to hear. So I have 5 questions that I always wrap with. And I
Perfect.
want to get to those, but before I do that, I just want to give you the opportunity. Any place in the world that you've been, whether it was United States or anywhere else, tell me just like the most amazing, incredible, or funny, or scary, or just tell me one more story or experience if there's anything that's like off the top of your head.
Well, one thing, and then I'll bring this back to something in India, because I was talking about the extremes. So the day after I was in uh, the Taj Mahal and experiencing this incredible thing, we fly down. I can't remember if this was Chennai or Madurai, but we fly there and we get off the plane, and there are, I'm not kidding, 40 armed soldiers at the airport. And this is a small airport. And when I say armed, I mean like with rifle, like AK-47 type of thing. I mean, these are not like little, guns and holsters like
Hmm.
police. And I was, and and the way some of them were joking with it, I felt like, oh my gosh, I forget how different things can be. And it was scary. We were honestly scared. Several of us were like, because we were like, what's going on? And I think as travelers, having the fear that something's going to go wrong, especially something really bad, like some kind of violent outbreak or something, is, I think, the lingering fear that everybody has about travel. And that's why a lot of people don't even travel. They're afraid of what could happen
Hmm.
that they can't guess. And that experience, I'll never forget it, because my heart, I mean, I thought I was going to pass out. I was so nervous. It was the way they were standing, and there was something going on, and we never did find out what it was. But I was, afraid. And it had nothing to do with India. It could have happened anywhere. And, I've seen some similar things, but they weren't quite in an aggressive mode like they were that day. Um, and that kind of thing just makes me think, wow, you got to be prepared for anything when you travel. Um, but that was a really scary moment. Many of us were scared. We still talk about it.
Jeez, I would say it like I can't imagine because I don't not that specific scenario and not with so many armed people there all at once. But
Mhm.
I did experience that actually in Rome was the first time I ever experienced just
Mm,
like people in military garb just walking around with assault rifles.
yes,
But they were just smatterings like here and there, so it was never I didn't feel threatened or frightened or anything like that in that situation. But I can imagine if there was a whole group of them, like 40 of them, that would be, yeah, shocking.
right. And you
So,
realize you could be told, get down on the ground or
mm-hmm,
anything.
mm-hmm,
And because you're not a citizen locally, you feel more vulnerable,
yeah,
and so so, and I say this because it kind of harkens to travel stuff, like just being prepared, having a safety plan. Like I travel, I'll tie in a tip to this too, but I do travel with, the phone number of the international number or local number in country I can use if I have a medical emergency or there's some kind of emergency like that. Like, who do you call? I have like a couple things I always fill out and I bring with me. I've never had to use them,
thank
but,
goodness.
it's kind of like you want to take an umbrella because then it's, first of all, it's probably not going to rain if you take your
Mm-hmm,
umbrella.
yep,
But it's always, and if you have those, then you don't panic as much. I did not have anything like that with me that day, and that's what made me realize I need it. So,
wow. This, this has been so much fun. I can't believe it's been an hour and 20 minutes plus. And I mean, it's flown by.
Yeah.
So this has been great. Thank you, Jocelyn. So yeah, I have five final questions to wrap with. And if you think of anything that, if they spur anything that you want to expand on a little bit, feel free.
Okay, perfect.
So the first question is, and I'm glad that you're a foodie. So of all of the places in the world that you have been, and I'm careful to phrase this question the way I do,
Mhm.
where's the most memorable meal experience and what was it that you've ever had?
That is really tough, but I'm going to go back to that cave in San Gimignano in Italy because we had a homemade pasta that was so light that day, and it was in a boar sauce. Boar is in wild pig, which I didn't think I'd like. I was thinking, oh, that sounds kind of gamey, but my sister wanted to order it, and we split it, and then we ordered another one because it was so good. It was the most delicate meat flavor I've ever had. It was tender, and it had these incredible spices. And I'm somebody, my mom was a trained chef, and I grew up, I mean, I was mincing garlic and chopping. I was a sous chef when I was 6 years old. So I'm pretty good at tasting things and being able to say, I know what they put in here. And I can usually go home and replicate things. I was trained well, and I could not figure out how to replicate this one. It was so good. And the vegetables they were like fresh out of the garden. And, and then you add a local wine to that. And then we were already talking about the olive oil and the fresh bread. I mean, if I were going to have a last meal, I'd say replicate that.
Wow. That's amazing. Never had anything like that. So very cool. Okay. One of my favorite questions of all of them is of all of the places in the world that you have been, even if I offered you a free trip, Jocelyn, go. Where is a place that you would not go back?
Where would I not go back?
And I'll say, because if you don't come up with something right away, I'll add this caveat. It could just be, I've been there and I just don't need to.
Got it. Yeah, because I was going to say I haven't had any bad experience where I wouldn't go back. I think where I wouldn't need to, and this again, this might sound insulting, but it's not. I loved my trip to Costa Rica,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't yet to go to South America, and so if I could go back to Costa Rica, but I'd be like, oh no, I really need to take that time to go to South America. I haven't been to Peru yet, and Chile, and Argentina, and stuff. And I loved Costa Rica, but also because it's so small. Spent a week there, and we drove all over, and we went everywhere. I did the zip line down the giant trees. We did river rafting. We did, we were at the ocean. We were in the city. We ate at the sodas, which are the little mom and pop
Mm-hmm.
food places around. So I feel like I did it so well in a week that I don't need to go
Okay, I'll accept the answer, even though I've been to Costa Rica 4 or 5 times and I can't wait to go back again.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's hey, this is you, not me. So any answer is a good answer. Okay, flipping that. So 180 degrees. Of all the places in the world that you have been, where is the one place that no matter what, absolutely you have to go back?
Thinking of a couple. I'm going to say Rome
Mm,
because I really want to get there again. And the thought of not going there again makes me sad.
yeah,
And so I'm like, I got to get there while I'm still able to travel and things like that, and really just enjoy everything about it. Enjoy the history, enjoy the people, enjoy the food, enjoy the museums, and just and enjoy walking around and just I have to get there again.
yeah. I would tend to agree. It's not the highest on my list, but I
Mhm.
do want to go back again because when I went, it was in August, and it was when the families were on. When they were taking their vacation time, and
Mhm.
so when like most of the really nice restaurants were closed, and so I think I missed out on part of the experience of Rome. So yeah, I would
Mhm.
like to go back as well. Good answer.
Awesome.
Good answer. All right. Okay, so question number 4 is of all of the places in the world that you have not been, where do you absolutely have to go? So, not bucket list, but like without question before you die, you have to go to this place.
That is a great question. I'm thinking because it's so hard. I'm thinking. because there's so many places. Oh, well, I have not been to Africa yet, and I know it's a continent, but I
Hmm.
really would like to go to. I want to go to Kenya.
Hmm.
But one thing too, I'm going to have to even trump that. I'm going to have to go to North Africa. I have not been to Egypt and seen the pyramids. And
Ah,
for the girl who grew up loving It's a Small World and camels and riding camels and everything else, I'm like, for me, and I saw King Tut when he came around the first time. I saw him when he came around the second time. For me, not to get to Egypt would be a miss. So I have to put that.
I actually thought of that right away when you talked about going to the Taj Mahal. I wondered if you've been there, but so yeah,
Not.
excellent. So the final question is pretty easy because you'll know the answer right away. What's in the plans already? Where are you going?
Well, that's a good question. I'm supposed to be leaving next week for Barcelona. I've never been to Spain. I definitely want to go to Spain. So I had that plan, but I've had to cancel my trip because with National Cyber Awareness Month coming out, I have a book coming out, and there's some changes and stuff I have to do. So I had to throttle the trip. And the people I was going with are still. I said, you need to go. Go ahead and go. I will go another time. But Barcelona, I want to get to Barcelona and Madrid, and so it's kind of in the plans, but it's getting pushed out. So that one for sure, and then I'm looking at getting to Argentina and Chile next year.
So awesome. So awesome. This has been really great, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for spending this much time with me. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we hit stop?
Just one thing, and I guess this comes back to me being life safety girl for
Mm-hmm.
everybody I care
Mm-hmm.
about, but just really think about you know when you're putting your checklist together of the things you're taking with you and to pack, please, please, please pack for your online safety as well, because I'm aware of a lot of things that are happening with AI enabled cyber threats and how things are growing. One thing I can offer, I do have, by the time this is out, I should have a checklist up, but I'm going to have a free, just a checklist of 10 safety things for travelers. And because a couple people asked me to put that together, and so I am. So if you're going to travel, please do that. And Bill, let me get that to you so you can share that. But I'd really like people to be safe when they travel, because you want to come back with funny stories, not bad stories.
Right. Absolutely. And everyone check out the website. Again, everything will be in the show notes. And yeah, this has been wonderful. I'm going to keep track of everything that you're doing. I'm going to subscribe to your podcast, and I'm going to start watch. I watch YouTube all the time, so I will be on there watching your episodes on there as well. And so, good luck with everything. Good luck with your book.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for for your wonderful podcast in general. And thank you for this wonderful experience of getting to take this walk down memory lane, and for us to get to connect and share these experiences, and for giving your audience so many things to consider and think about to enrich their lives. Thank you for all you do, Bill.
Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sounds great.
And there's another episode of the Where Have You Been podcast in the books. Thank you so much for listening today. There was another great guest with some great stories, as always, and I hope that you will support all of the guests by checking out the show notes and going to their web pages, seeing any socials and projects that they may have going on. And please, again, I'll ask as always to like, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It really does help to allow the podcast to grow and reach more people, and I appreciate you for doing that. Also, if you haven't done so, check out the website, whybpodcast.com, where you can find blog posts. If you'd like to be a guest, please register to be a guest on the site, and check out the merch page. There's some really cool stuff if you're interested in representing the pod, along with some other cool travel items and apparel that I'm working on every day as well. Join me again next week for another great guest with more incredible stories. New episodes drop every Sunday just after midnight Eastern Time. Until then, thank you for being here, and have a great day.